what I've heard from parents in my own experience of how it kind of works is once you're on, we're still kind of tracking, so maybe what you're saying is they were getting tracked.
I mean, I just see data, I don't know the drivers of it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to my question, because I think we deviated from that. So let's look at total number of male students enrolled in English and total number of male students enrolled in social studies. That's almost 100 kid difference. Is that because there are that many junior high boys enrolled in special ed? Across the district, many more, and then they're not enrolled in special ed for social studies or science? Because the girls' numbers are pretty close when you look at those three subjects. It's, social studies is not a special ed.
Right, or
science.
science.
Or science.
And that's
Right.
why the numbers are larger,
And that's
plus
why
it's 2 grade levels here you're looking at.
Right, right, but there's still, and when you look at the girls, we don't
Okay.
see that huge number difference. So that's, so that's special ed, boys.
There is a higher number.
Right, there are a higher number of boys in special ed, so they
Okay.
could be being pulled out because they're in an LC
Right,
language arts class,
Right.
so they wouldn't be represented in a
right, right.
challenge or general language
Okay.
arts class.
Perfect, that's what I was trying to make sense of. Okay, thank you.
And how many of these kids are taking 2, 3, 4 challenge classes? Because, so some of my general students, right, if I'm looking at science, which has less kids in the challenge, overall, now I'm going back to the overall number.
Okay.
So overall, I have 34% in science. In social studies, am I reading that correctly? I have 26% of students in. So that would tell me that these kids that are in challenge, that are really at a, you know, at a highly capable level, those same kids are in these general classes, so that's a pretty heterogeneous group then, because if I have my kids that are going in challenge here and they're moving out of challenge in social studies and science, then we have a lot of heterogeneity in that.
So more than you do in the language arts class,
More than I do in
in the language arts class. Right.
But I think if I think what your question might be, how many students are in at least one general class? It's probably going to be 80-ish% or more, because 74% in general social studies. So the lowest you could be is 74%. And so in that question of, or is everyone being tracked or something like that, it looks like there's a lot of mix across the students. And so you'd want to see, I think what you want to see is how many students are taking 4 challenge, 3 challenge, 2 challenge, 1
I
challenge,
think
no
that's
challenge.
a really important number, because if I'm a student and part of my classes are challenge and part of my classes aren't challenge, and I'm a highly motivated student in certain areas, then I'm still contributing to heterogeneity in the general classes, and I'm helping to diversify those classes. And also, if I'm a student that maybe is special ed or ELL, and I'm in the and I choose a challenge class in math, let's say, but maybe my language, I can't take all 4 of them as challenge, I'm still contributing to the heterogeneity in the challenge class I choose. So I'm just saying, I think that there's a lot of heterogeneity in these classes, and they're not as homogeneous as we might think they are.
The other thing to remember is that 6th graders have math and they have language arts, but they don't necessarily have a dedicated science class or dedicated social studies class. So when they come and take an hour of science every day, for many of them, when we talk to parents, kind of kids are registering, they're like, okay, we're ready to math, but we're in language arts, we're still trying to figure out the science and social studies thing. So we'll try science in a regular class or social studies in a regular class, and then maybe in my 8th grade year I'll move up to a challenge. So when I'm building my master schedule, I always have to build more sections of regular social studies and regular science than I have to of regular language arts or.
So we see an increase in the 8th grade.
Right, in 8th and 9th grade, and they start, okay, now we've got this junior high thing figured out, we're ready to take some more
So
rigor.
If I'm correct, this chart is a distillation of an earlier chart that the board received in your briefing that actually had every single
Every
class.
Yeah, I remember that.
At every,
Yes.
and all the core content areas for every single junior high. That was a much better look, although a much larger, denser document to distill. That's the one where you can see really across every class what the class composition is. And so that does a better job of demonstrating the choices that kids make and which students end up generally in challenge classes and which students generally end up more in general ed class.
I
And
just want,
we could resend
Probably,
that.
I'd like to, I've seen that, I just would like to know how many, it didn't, that chart still did not tell me how many students were taking all, what percentage of students are taking all
No,
four
it doesn't.
challenge
No, it
classes,
doesn't.
3, 2, 1. My guess is there's this many students taking all 4 as challenge, and that's just a hypothesis. And there's more students that are mixing, doing a hybrid model.
We can check in with a parent here who has kids in the program and then hear from Jen and
Well, I
and
think
Lynn.
personally, and I saw the data that you were talking about a lot, remember a lot of data going on there, but if you look at each school, you can really see a different pattern. Like, for example, my kids are at Timbercrest, and the percentages are really different at Timbercrest, and I know Ann has talked about that, where compared to other schools, Timbercrest has a lot more challenge classes than other schools. So if you look at the difference between the schools, that, some of it does even out, but it's different. Like, I can't remember what you
We
said
have
with
more
the,
kids in challenge
math.
math than regular math.
yeah, so
We
it
have,
really
like,
varies
3
by
regular sections
by
and about
school. Um,
But how many, I mean, what is that?
And then definitely the math and the boys number is so true. My daughter said boys don't want to take challenge English. They don't want to. I mean, in general,
That
so.
most, there's just kind of a small amount of kids that are taking all 4 challenge.
Not at
Not at
Timbercrest.
Timbercrest.
We have
There's
more that are taking 3 and 4 versus.
A lot that
two.
take.
and I would even say that's true of Kenmore, that we have a lot of kids that choose to take challenge classes. And so that's where you get that heavily tracked, especially then when you add in the extra layer of the elective. The kids that are, we have a very robust music program at Kenmore. And that also adds a very, another layer of tracking to a kid's day. So even looking at, so we have 4 regular 8th grade math classes, and then we have 3 challenge 8th grade math. And the 8th grade math 3rd period is vastly different than the 8th grade math 6th period because of the electives and the other drivers. So some of those 8th grade math 3rd period may have chosen 1 or 2 other challenge classes, but the 6th grade, the 6th period math class, those students have chosen no challenge classes and are also tracked by that elective. And so you kind of, when sometimes you get these new students and you have no choice but to put them, there's one schedule that works for them.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it's not that we're doing tracking, but what happens with this group of students, that they're getting tracked essentially, this small group of students, it's probably, I mean, if you're taking 2 or 3 challenge classes, you're probably mixing with all different types of students.
Mostly other challenge students.
But if I'm only taking no challenge classes or 1, then I might get into this situation where now that's the same group of students that I'm with all the time and I'm not getting any other.
You get a little
type
bit more
of-
variability with the kids that choose some challenge classes. It's the kids that don't choose any challenge
Well,
classes
that's what I'm
that
hearing you
get
say.
no variability.
Okay, you didn't say that. Can we get a number on that? I would,
I mean-
I'd really appreciate that, yeah. And how many are taking no challenge?
So if I can just ask the question, is, there's, on the earlier slide, it says equitable tracking and deep tracking. I've seen that term. Just like, pretend I'm starting from scratch. Is tracking bad? Is tracking good? Is there an opinion around tracking?
Many.
For one thing that, I think in terms of many things, one of the things you saw was growth mindset. I mean, that's a very big topic in all levels of education at this point. And sometimes I feel like the choice, you know, when kids choose one place or the other, it kind of locks them to some degree into some fixed mindset characteristics, especially for even some kids that may choose that challenge, choose to take the self-select challenge class. Then they're so paralyzed by fear that they may not belong. They get in this fixed mindset where it's hard to get them to work on things to get stronger. And even you maybe get some kids that could have chosen into that choose not to because they have kind of that fixed mindset. They kind of want to be where they're at, but they really are capable. So I think the growth mindset, when you track, or you know, the kids track themselves kind of to some degree, right? We're not tracking them, but they're tracking themselves by some of these choices. But it leads into that fixed mindset. That makes it harder for us to, you know, teach them some of those other characteristics. It's you know, I mean, something we're all really, I feel like that is a big thing in middle level education right now, is to try to teach that growth mindset that you can get better at things. But it's really hard for them sometimes with the structure we have. I feel like it contributes to the fixed mindset.
I'm gonna suggest we maybe keep going and get to some of the preliminary recommendations.
So at the beginning of this presentation, seems a while ago now, I talked about the 20 hours of time that this subcommittee has spent, and of course it's important that we've reached some recommendations for the middle school task force. We will recommend that the AEP program continue, and that would be grades 6 through 8. And I can say that we will be at 3 sites with reconfiguration in the fall of 2017.
So the goal around 3 sites is to have a clear feeder into each of the 4 high schools.
We spent time looking also at that other end of the spectrum, the special education students, and they will be served according to their IEPs, so that's very individual placement, but in the least restrictive environment. And our most recent recommendation was that we would maintain the status quo. We'd have math acceleration in middle school. And the subcommittee was really clear that they did not want to tell the math teachers what that should be, that we're going to have a math lead teacher team who will develop the details. But what I can tell you is when we say maintain the status quo, we mean that each students will continue their math trajectory. They double accelerate in grades 3 and 4, and so if they leave elementary finishing grade 7 math, they'll have grade 8 math as 6th graders in the middle school. We'll still have options for double acceleration between grades 6 and 7, so that students who are ready can go from 6th grade into algebra. And 7th graders will continue to have opportunity for a compacted math course where they take 3 years of math compacted into 2 and have algebra as 8th graders.
Is that
So those
choice?
are the things that will be, when we say maintain the status quo.
Is that choice self-selected?
Double acceleration is not self-select, but the
Compacted.
the compacted math course, that's one of the details we're leaving to the math lead teacher team to wrestle with. So Jen is going to be
So we'll hear about that.
you'll hear about it. So our group is going to get back together again, either right before midwinter break, right after midwinter break. And at that time, we'll take a look at the UW graduate student research study that was conducted this fall that we already have received copies of. We're going to look at information about neighboring school districts and what their programs are in terms of highly capable and honors challenge self-select. Is that in there?
Yes,
That is in there.
it looks like every district has some type of honors or self-select, except for Bellevue, is how I'm reading it.
Well, what we noticed is that if a school district that not all school districts have middle-level high-cap programs. So you can see that Everett doesn't, Shoreline does not. And so they have to self-select honors classes and core competency areas.
So like Washington has the honors classes for all.
They
It's not a
do,
separate class.
yeah, they do, all their students are in the same class. And they do a challenging curriculum for all students. All students are in the same class.
When it says students can choose to complete it, it's maybe getting a little in the weeds, but it's the right to understand since it's on here. Students can choose to complete additional challenging assignments. Does that mean that they're graded differently within the same class?
So and
Or
this
it's
is
just
still.
choice extra credit
yeah.
or something?
So this still has to go through the subcommittee process, but I talked to the principal at Inglewood Middle School in Lake Washington, and they have students within an English class can choose to, they'll be like on an assignment, you can do this, you can do assignment A, or you can do assignment B, and assignment B would be more at an enriched advanced level. And students can choose which assignment, so they're differentiated throughout all of their
How do you
classes.
grade that differently?
He says they've done a lot of training with teachers, and they've been doing that model at Inglewood for several years. When Lake Washington did a reconfiguration to middle schools, the rest of the middle schools adopted the Inglewood model. So,
Sky, do you have that for years?
All right. Is the ESEC presentation?
no, that's something that the subcommittee will look at, the ESEC comparison data that you've seen in your board briefings.
But it is a look at the assessment performance of our 7th and 8th graders in relation to some of our surrounding school districts as well, like Washington, Bellevue. So that's what we'll look at a future meeting. And then our next steps, obviously, we're going to review and analyze that additional information. And then we're going to develop a theory of action that will define what the subcommittee believes it will take to operationalize challenging and rigorous curriculum for all middle school students, which we'll present to the task force. And our subcommittee will need to wrestle with that, and now they have the option of moving one recommendation forward or two recommendations to the middle school grade reconfiguration task force. If there are two recommendations, there's going to be a lot of overlap between them, because the goal is that every student have a challenging and rigorous curriculum. So Jen mentioned growth mindset. We would see that in either one of the recommendations. We'd see differentiation in either one of the recommendations because students' abilities vary. Even when you group them in a challenge, you group them in an AAP class, there's a lot of variation.
So I read that the teachers are finding that hard to do, for at least the 8 teachers out of 20 that were selected, or 7, were finding that hard to do even within a challenge class. So I can't imagine how much more difficult that will be.
I think they're
In a-
doing it to some extent.
They were
right
saying
now.
how hard it was
It's certainly
to reach
harder than
that.
just teaching to the middle. It definitely is harder than teaching to
Well,
the
and
middle.
certainly our teachers can speak to that and how they're differentiating within the curriculum if you'd like to hear from them too.
I think it would be to some degree, like, like what they're talking about, Lake Washington, where they have, 7th grade English, and then they have these challenge options. It makes it easier to some degree if teachers can team together, because then there's just 7th grade English, so you've got a couple people, so they can, this is our topic, how do we differentiate, how do we, when we plan these things, we say, okay, how do we know a kid has it? What are we gonna do with them when they do? Challenge up. What are we gonna do with them when they don't? Differentiate to support the struggle and learn. So the ability to teach with somebody and plan and build off of each other's and, is I think a huge piece.
And I think the springboard curriculum for English has been very helpful for that. So we can work together as grade level teams in our school as well as, multiple junior highs to build differentiation lessons. That's been extremely helpful, and that's exactly what we've done. I also think that even in a challenge classroom, I was teaching, there were kids that, because it's self-select, right? They're not testing in. So anybody can be in a challenge classroom. So I'd have kids down here that in a general ed classroom, typical general ed classroom, they'd be struggling learners, but they wanted to, for whatever reason, they wanted to be in challenge. And then we have kids way up here. So in the challenge classrooms, we have this, and in the gen ed classrooms, we have
But
this.
that was my point, they're already heterogeneous classes. I mean, they're differentiated already, our challenge versus our gen ed classes. There's a lot of talk that they're homogeneous, but I think they're more heterogeneous than what we're really acknowledging. I think that was a great point.
Although something's keeping free reduced lunch kiddos and special ed students from being in challenge.
So if you look at Kenmore, a large portion of our free and reduced special ed 504 kids are all tracked now into 4 sections of regular ed, which makes it very challenging to differentiate within there, because you've got some, and then, you know, like Ann spoke to the increase in anxiety, which may have a 504 but may not. I had a 7th grade gen ed class last year that had 24 students, and at least half of them had some other issue, whether it be brand new to the country, you know, Ukrainian speaker, brand new to the country, Spanish speaker, anxiety, you know, social emotional problems. It was an exhausting hour.
And if I can follow up on that, and I'll just call it out for what I think. So what I'm seeing here is that there's this code word, a challenging and rigorous curriculum. It sounds like the challenge program in general is being proposed to do away with. And in that class that you just talked about that was exhausting, if we do away with challenge and just go to one level, then you would add in students who had, for lack of a better term, higher ability and increase the ability levels in that classroom. Is that what I'm understanding is the sort of proposal?
Well, we're
There's no
still
proposal.
studying that, we haven't,
There's no proposal.
we aren't ready to make
There's lots
that.
of work to be done. Certainly, everybody has their different opinions on the topic, and you have very passionate people that view it this way, and passionate people that view it that way. And the thing, you read through this and you can see that there's, in the article I read today with Rick Wormeli talks about the importance of detracting from those schools. So you can find articles to support, and you can find articles that don't support it. It's operationalizing that for what is going to work for North Shore. That's our task to do. And that's what we're asking people at the table to come and to work through and to do their best work and come forward with a recommendation to the task force.
And that's what you're waiting on the surrogate form in order to get that?
One more piece of
Just one more piece.
information. There were 4 instead of.
Right.
So the UW, I'm sure it's probably very popular, but the UW study, I thought had a lot of flaws in it. So maybe we can talk offline about it, and, you know, I don't know that I want to necessarily take up everybody's time here, but I would definitely like to meet with you guys about it. I'm concerned that's one of the pieces that we're using graduate students that have done this, and I was, you know, I do this in my job too, and I was there was a lot of things that I was very concerned about in that study. And
It's only been distributed to the school board. Our committee hasn't seen it.
well, you guys haven't seen it?
I've seen it,
Yes,
but our
we have.
subcommittee has seen it.
Okay, so maybe we
We'd
can.
like to meet, absolutely.
I would
Yes.
love to meet with you guys and tell you what
Sure.
I see in it, or share with you,
Yeah.
not tell you, but share with you what I see.
Yeah, we'd be glad to do that,
Okay,
absolutely.
sooner rather than
So just to finish up here, theory of action identifies the mutual dependencies that are required to get really complex work done. So we will put together a series of statements. Here's a really concise example of the theory of action. It talks about if teachers have access to something, if administrators do their part, teachers can teach higher level writing skills and the end result of these students' performance will increase. So we'll be writing an if-then theory of action. Whether we have 1 or 2 recommendations, there will be not just a yes, no vote, but here's what should be in place in order for this to happen.
Can you explain that a little more? Here's what, it's not just going to be a yes, no, but you're going to give, if if we do this, then this needs to happen, is that what you're saying?
So other people in the public affairs school or at UW where I used to teach, we called this logic modeling. And you're trying to just say this leads to that and so you're looking for those planned actions. It would seem to make sense, since there's a lot of disagreement on tracking and detracking, to say, and I think that we have a partially tracked model, written, not necessarily fully tracked, but partially tracking in our district, to show what would it look like, because, I mean, there's people in our community concerned about getting rid of challenge. What does it look like to keep challenge? What's the if-then, and how does that look? And what does it look like to try and not have that in something else? And I think there's other models like Bellevue and other places that are trying that and to get a better feel for that. But I think in order for me to feel comfortable with it, if I get one proposal, I'm not going to be very pleased, because I want to see both sides, and I think there's reasons, and we know that there's lots of research showing both of those different sides. So I think theory action is a great idea, and I think it also helps to go to the implementation. I also have read the UW study, and I'm a professor. It's not, there's substantial concerns that I would have with it, and so so I think that I would recommend a limited amount of value be placed on it, but we could, maybe Jerome and I could both meet with you on that. I would love to see that theory of action. I think it'll help refine the thinking. I think that's a great idea.
And that's why I said our subcommittee will decide on submitting one or two. And we'll take what you just said into consideration.
And also, the subcommittee has not seen the UW research study results, so they've heard your comments tonight, both of you, so they'll be able to read that and process that through.
Yeah, and I mean, I know you guys are doing a lot of hard work on this, and I hope that you don't hear that, I mean, I think, I did my own little literature review because I have access to a lot of research articles, and I don't know, I'm a novice at the language of the educational field, because I know the psychological field, but I'm a novice. When I started getting into it, I'm like, I don't know this language, that language, that language. I had pulled up a bunch of research articles, right? What I found hard to find there is I had a hard time finding research that had been done on programs like ours, on self-select programs. So yes, there was this or there was this, but to find kind of this hybrid model, and even in the UW's research, they didn't come up with studies that had looked, that I saw, that had actually been able to find a self-select per se model. And so I think there's not a lot of research that's been done on that, is what I'm gathering.
I would say there's not as much research.
I think they did, my recollection is it was addressed in the study. And the models were students self-identify for an honors level course. And I think what it showed is somewhat what we see in our own data, which is kids make selection choices that fall along predictable ethnic and socioeconomic lines. You know, and I think we see that somewhat reflected in our own information. That's what I recall from the study.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Kim, and well, all of your comments, and I think that one of the things that we've realized as a task force is that we want this to be an adaptive change and not just technical. I mean, we really want to do significant work in preparing our adolescents and really creating a program that fits their needs and helps them to grow, become responsible high school students and adults. And what we have found through everything, we can't just go take a school district or a school community and just adopt it and bring it here. And there's no one right way out there. And you can see from this document of surrounding school districts and how they choose to do their middle school academic program. There's no one way that everyone does. There's a variety of ways that you can implement your academic program. And every school takes what they know, what they learn, and then what fits with their district. And that's what we're trying to do, is figure out how do we operationalize this for North Shore. And there's a lot, you're right, Kim, a lot of work has been done by many people, and they still have work to do. And I'm very thankful for all of that.
One thing I'd just like to ask really quick is the flip side of that. When we're having everybody in the same classroom, And I hear there's equity issues either way. There's just equity issues that we've got to figure out. You know that's my heart, right? I mean, that's my passion. So I think that it goes either way. But even in a regular classroom, my concern is sometimes that we track and we just don't realize that we're tracking. Do you know what I'm saying? If I give the example of reading, or if I give this kid, you get the special assignment, you know, because you can handle, you know, these two students, they get the extra work. This student doesn't get the extra work. That can end up being tracking too. And so,
I'm gonna have Lynn just speak to that.
So I don't, so in my class I definitely, like, you've got to figure out where your kids are. I don't track them by like, you get this assignment or you get that, but I give them a lot of options. And then I do a lot of, you know, if I see that somebody I think is actually kind of taking the easy way out, that's an individual conference that I have with that student. So I'm like, I think you really need to, I really want you to give this one a try. Or, you know, I've seen that you've done kind of work at this level, I need you to boost it up, I need to see the next level. So constantly, I don't care where you are in my classroom, I don't care what level you're at, I'm gonna meet you where you are and I'm gonna push you forward. And so I don't necessarily track, I don't track by groups like this group. I might pull a group of students to work with, a small group of students, but in that small group I might have what you would consider a low student and a medium student and a high student. It's just what skill are we working on and what is it that I need to see. So it's not about, I don't know about tracking in English or I'm in social studies, so that's kind of my background. So I don't know about tracking in that way. I don't necessarily see that because it's like wherever you are and I'm gonna move you forward, whether it's, and maybe this time you'll be in the same group with these same two people because you're both struggling on it. But the next time, I'm not gonna pull either one of you and I'm gonna pull these kids in. So I don't necessarily, that has not been my experience.
I have two real quick items. One, on the bottom of this page 2 of 2, it says agreed not to move forward with standards-based assessment, grading, and reporting.
So there was a discussion early on about moving towards a standards-based report card rather than your A, B, C, D for middle schools. That's something that's talked about in the guiding work for middle schools.
Is going to standards-based?
Yeah, standards-based. Like Washington had mentioned that they wish they would have done it when they did grade reconfiguration because now they're trying to do it. We have an elementary standards report card, and so some of the concern from parents expressed was, well, can we just continue on with that report card or not? What's it going to be for 6-8 compared to K-5? We decided as a task force that was too much for us to move forward on, so we put it on hold. That's why it's there at the bottom.
So it'll be letter grades?
Yep.
As traditional? Okay.
Traditional. We have pockets of teachers that are doing wonderful experimental things and
Right.
that are using standards-based, but at the end of the day, they have to convert it to a grade.
Okay. And then the other thing is, I would be open, but I'm not sure that anyone else in the district would be, to differentiation across the junior highs. And so if there's a bunch of different models out there that work, experimenting, and so having one model for every junior high in the district is one approach. Another approach is if there's a couple models that fall out that are promising, because we really don't know what's going to work. We haven't done it before. There's other models to draw from. I'm open to that. I don't know if that's feasible and if that just throws way too many wrenches in your works. But if it comes down to that and say, well, let's try this, but let's also have this one type of a thing or pockets of innovation, I think we should be open to that. I certainly am.
You know, and I have a thought, kind of roping back around to one of my earlier questions based off something you just said, Kimberly, is, you know, another initiative we have going on right now is our equity initiative in our district. And, you know, it strikes me that the timing of the feedback we're going to get from the focus groups and, you know, really getting some really good data in terms of how it works for different types of students in our district could really inform a lot of these. If the timing works out, I think that would be a great synergy if we could do it.
I think that's a good point. And one more question I have, what is the difference, help me understand the difference between high school, I can take an AP course or a non-AP course, versus junior high, now I potentially don't see that as a good fit. Or we might not see that as a good fit. Like, why in high school
Talking
would that be
self-select almost kind of?
yeah, why is that why 9th through 12th? Is that still a model that we support, but we might not support that same model? Like, what is the difference there?
I think it has to do with what's developmentally appropriate for students at their particular time in life. And as Anne was talking about earlier, middle school students are at a stage where they want to explore. We want them to explore a lot of options. We don't want them to just have a fixed mindset, as Jen was saying, about what their abilities are. But when you get to 9th or 12, students are more mature. They have a better sense of who they are and where they're going. And so it's developmentally appropriate at high school.
It's also, I mean, high school isn't totally wide open. You don't get to opt into Spanish 4, or you don't get to say, I'm just gonna take calculus next year. There's, in many subject areas, there are progressions. There are other subject area domains where that doesn't necessarily apply, but in a lot of the subject areas, you have to have the prerequisites as well, so it's not completely open.
And it's been my experience just as a parent, that parents tend to be more conservative at high school in terms of taking a chance on taking an advanced class because of the transcripts. Being able to experiment pre-transcript, perhaps that makes a difference in terms of how a family would look at it, or,
But I would wonder if some of the same percentages aren't true, and some of the same things that we're seeing here aren't happening there, and so then we're talking about more, how do we target this versus maybe how do we completely overhaul our system?
Well, maybe that's looking at districts who have had kids, because I wonder what the difference would be too, is if they start in 7th grade and have the self-select and they're already in that track versus not having it in 6, 7, 8 and what they choose when they get to high school, because that might be a difference too. So it might be good to look at both of those data points.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting, or good information to have. Can you write that one down?
Sorry.
Please, please.
I don't know if we have that information.
Well, you actually, the subcommittee I got to attend was when Eric McDowell was talking about the performance in Bellevue when he was at Odell Middle School. And the Bellevue stats, what a performance measure, talking about students who choose to go beyond Algebra 2. I mean, I can't remember exactly what he quoted, but it was much higher than ours. It was much higher. I just remember because we had just reviewed it and then he said it and I remember being shocked.
I would hope
Some of that might be available.
Yeah. And I know that the Save Our Challenge program has some data that shows that the achievement gap has closed since we've had challenge. And I would just ask if that's there is some data out there that's been put together by data that we have on our website. So I don't know if somehow we can get that or
I think, we've done a bit of work when we presented, when Heather and Gretchen have presented like I think it's 1.6, the, 8th grade algebra that would, we presented that already? Yeah, so we just, can't remember, there's so many at the secondary level, but that would be a good, probably presentation to go back and look at, because I think we look at boys, females, males, females taking the class, and we do free and reduced lunch, we did the special ed, so we can see how many, so we could do a review of that,
and maybe we can ask
analysis.
that Nancy or one of you guys send what you have over. I've seen it. So
Nancy?
I mean,
See if I have it with
Come on,
me.
Nancy.
no, send it like not to them. To see. I'm just saying, I think there might be some information where they put together some data points that might,
Interesting,
yeah,
because we have branded as well.
yeah.
Sure.
So maybe we can partner with it.
Great.
Okay, well, I just want to thank,
Yeah, I don't know how to put this, but as we look at this data, and I think why this conversation has been challenging, I've been thinking, what resonates with me, what I've got 3 kids, they've all been identified as highly capable. And then I started going through how they've been educated as highly capable in the 16 years, 17 years that I've been doing this. So we started in another district, and at the elementary level, they were in general ed, they were pulled out for subject matter. They were in a self-contained, highly capable class. I had 1 year where I had 2 kids at elementary school in 2 different elementary school highly capable programs, self-contained. When we moved here, I've done general ed, pulled out for subject matter, clustered, over to the junior high for math, EAP, self-contained, one that qualified that didn't go, qualified for EAP but stayed at the home school. At junior high, I've done general ed, honors, back in the day when we did honors, self-select challenge, AAP, clustered, pre-IB, AP, and now I have 2 that have done a full IB diploma at Inglemoor. And I think what the problem is every year we change how we're educating our kids, and I think when we look at this data, we've got to keep that in mind, that we've got a million different options for kids. We keep changing the options for kids. And I envy people that have only done 2 or 3 of these and can say this works, this doesn't, because I got a whole page of them. And I got 3 kids that have done this, and it's 2 of the principals in the room can attest, they're very different kids, and so what worked for one didn't work for another. So I think that's why this is such a hard conversation, is we've tried so many different things and we don't stick with anything long enough to actually
And we've
get.
had challenge for how long?
It's not that many
5 years?
years. 4 or 5
It was
years.
before I
Years,
came on
I
the board.
think. 4 to 5, is that
Well,
right? We figured it out.
Depends on, I mean, you've always had some sort of acceleration in math.
Right.
Right.
But it
Yeah.
was, the self-select for
Right.
math started, this is our 4th year. Our current juniors were the last group that was, where the kids were placed via testing for English and math. So my son's a junior, so he's in that group. And then every group since then, so the 10th graders now down to our current 7th graders have all been self-selected for, and then they rolled into social studies and science.
2 years in science.
I mean, has there not been a way to bring somebody in and do a program study on our program? How does it work for our?
Well, it sounds like this is kind of what's been happening with going to the AMLE conferences. I mean, it's not, we haven't had an outside resource come in.
I mean, just an actual program evaluation, I'm talking about, like,
Right.
not someone coming in and doing a program evaluation. Does it work? What's it doing? I know we have numbers here, but actually,
We don't have a program, we haven't had a consistent program that's applied to all the schools.
4 years, you said.
Yeah, but we don't, it's not at all the schools and all the kids don't have access.
Challenge isn't that always good?
Challenges now.
That's what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
but not in all the subjects, and not every kid takes, I mean, and it's different for teachers. And that's it, when you were asking about what's the difference, and if I could say what has consistently been the best, it's that pre-IB AP 9th grade class that's consistent, and because that's got a national rigor, there's training, honors is a label you can throw on any class. In fact, Garfield High was notorious for doing that, right? If you weren't in the AP, then you were in honors, right? And college admissions people will roll their eyes anytime they get a transcript that's full of honors, because there's no backing to it. There's nothing to it that says, here's what honors means. And that's part of the work here, is we're gonna label a class, let's have it mean something so that everybody knows what that looks like.
And I agree. I mean, I have 4 kids, and they've all gone. One I could barely get through high school, as everybody knows. The other one, literally, we were lucky to graduate her out of North Shore Networks at 20. And then another one that, is going to be going to Stanford and changing the world. I mean, it's just, they're different, I don't know what the factors were that created her going one direction, but
And, just to
I
distill
don't
it,
think it was the school, is my point.
right, Right, and and I think, I'm sorry to be redundant, I've said this a lot of times, I mean, I think this is a very hard question. This is a very hard question, and I've always tried, and I personally wrestle, I have kids, again, all over the spectrum that have interacted with challenge courses in different ways, and I've been trying to frame it myself in terms of improving on what we have. The point is not to go backwards, but to improve on what we have, and we have, if we're changing the philosophy at the middle school, then how does that roll down? And so I appreciate all of the data and all the ideas about program evaluation and all, because it all comes back again to me as being just a difficult question, and unfortunately revolves around brain science that not everyone has nailed yet. We just, it would be great if we had, all this science behind it, and folks agree, brain rules. I mean, folks agree, we just don't have all the science behind it nailed. And so I appreciate the opportunity to have a discussion about it in the middle. I mean, I think it can be difficult when the board has all these questions, but it's hard not to. It's very hard not to. So thank you for taking the time.
I know this might be hard for you guys, but it's so much better for me to hear it, and when we're having the community ask us questions, it's that I'd rather get the updates and hear where we're at, and
For sure.
So I thank you, Heather,
Yeah.
and thank you, Gretchen, and all the members of the task force. Regarding it's been a long day for a lot of people, including the board and myself and everybody. And I think when we started on this journey 4 years ago, I think we always knew that the biggest point of action as we looked at grade reconfiguration was going to be at the middle level, that whole conversion from junior high to middle school. So it's somewhat predictable that we're wrestling perhaps more with the changes at this level than at the elementary and the high school levels. And I think it's healthy and it's good, and we're going to get, I'm sure, I'm confident, more right than wrong as we move this transition, and what we don't get right, we're going to get right over time. So I just thank everybody who's invested in making that happen, and they're doing great work. Thanks much.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
I want